My name is Dr. Marcus Reid, and what I'm about to tell you happened during a marine biology expedition in the Florida Everglades 3 years ago. I've been a marine biologist for 15 years, published dozens of papers on wetland ecosystems, and I've always prided myself on being a rational, evidence-based scientist. But what I experienced during those 10 weeks changed everything I thought I knew about the world. The expedition was focused on studying the impact of rising sea levels on mangrove root systems and their associated marine life. It was funded by the National Science Foundation and overseen by someone I'd never met in person, Dr. Helena Voss. I'd only communicated with her through email and video calls, but her reputation preceded her. She was supposedly one of the leading experts in coastal ecosystem preservation, though when I tried to look up her previous work, I found surprisingly little published material for someone of her alleged stature. I arrived at the research station, a collection of prefabricated buildings on stilts deep in the Everglades, with 5 other researchers. Among them was Dr. Kevin Martinez, who I'd known since graduate school at Woods Hole. Kevin was the most pragmatic person I'd ever met, the kind of guy who double-checked every measurement and questioned every assumption. That's why what he told me on our first night there caught me completely off guard. We were sitting on the dock, watching the sun set over the endless expanse of mangroves, when I asked him about Dr. Voss. He'd worked with her on a previous project studying coral bleaching in the Keys. "She's different," Kevin said, staring out at the water. "Different how?" Kevin was quiet for a long moment. "Marcus, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I have to tell you something. Dr. Voss isn't. She's not like us." I laughed. "What do you mean? Is she some kind of perfectionist control freak?" Kevin turned to look at me, and his expression was deadly serious. "I mean, she's not human, Marcus. I know how that sounds, but you'll understand when you meet her." I stared at him in disbelief. This was Kevin, the guy who used to mock paranormal shows and conspiracy theories. "Come on, man. What's really going on? Is this some kind of hazing ritual for new team members?" "I wish it were," Kevin said. "Just when she gets here tomorrow, pay attention. Really pay attention to everything about her." That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying Kevin's words, trying to figure out what he could possibly mean. Was Dr. Voss some kind of eccentric? Socially awkward? I'd worked with plenty of brilliant scientists who were a bit odd, but Kevin's warning felt different, more urgent, more frightening. Dr. Voss arrived the next morning via airboat, just as the mist was lifting off the water. From a distance, she looked normal enough, tall, slender, wearing standard field gear. But as she approached the dock, I began to understand what Kevin meant. Her movements were too fluid, too precise. Most people stumble a little getting off a boat, especially onto a floating dock, but she stepped off the airboat with perfect balance, as if she calculated every micro-movement in advance. Her skin had an unusual quality in the morning light, almost luminescent, like it was lit from within. I found myself staring, which was embarrassing because she was undeniably beautiful, but it was more than that. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost engineered, too perfect to be natural. When she spoke to the assembled team, introducing herself and outlining our objectives, her voice had a strange quality. It was melodious, but somehow artificial, like she was carefully modulating each word. She never seemed to blink as much as normal people do, and when she looked at you, it felt like she was seeing more than just your surface, like she was analyzing you at some deeper level. The first week proceeded normally enough. We collected water samples, cataloged species, and documented changes in the root systems. But I noticed things about Dr. Voss that disturbed me. She never ate during our communal meals, claiming she had severe food allergies that required her to prepare special meals in her private quarters. She never seemed to sweat, despite the oppressive humidity and heat. and she had an uncanny ability to predict where we'd find certain species before we'd even checked our monitoring equipment. The strangest thing, though, was her relationship with dying animals. In an ecosystem like the Everglades, death is a constant presence. Fish killed by algae blooms, birds succumbing to disease, reptiles and mammals falling victim to predators or environmental stress. But Dr. Voss always seemed to be present when something was dying. It started with a manatee calf we'd been tracking. The little guy had been struggling with some kind of respiratory infection, and we'd been monitoring him closely. One afternoon, our tracking data showed he'd stopped moving. When we arrived at the location, we found Dr. Voss crouched in the shallow water next to the calf's body. She claimed she'd just discovered it, but something about the scene felt wrong. The way she was positioned, with her face so close to the animal, an expression on her face, not sad or concerned, but almost satisfied. After that incident, I started paying closer attention. Over the following weeks, I noticed a pattern. Whenever we found a dying or recently dead animal, Dr. Voss was either already there or arrived shortly after. A great blue heron with a broken wing, a young alligator that had been attacked by a larger male, a dolphin that had gotten trapped in shallow water during low tide and couldn't escape in time. Each time, Dr. Voss would examine the animal closely, often touching it or placing her face very near to it. And each time, she seemed more energized afterward. Her movements would become more fluid, her voice more confident. Her skin would take on an even more pronounced luminescent quality. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe she was just a dedicated researcher who was particularly interested in mortality patterns in the ecosystem. Maybe the stress of the field work was making me paranoid. But Kevin confirmed my observations. She's feeding, he said one evening when we were alone. I don't know how or what exactly she's taking from them, but she's definitely feeding. That's insane, Kevin. People don't feed on dying animals. People don't, Kevin agreed. But I told you she's not people. The breaking point came during our 6th week. We'd been tracking a large bull shark that had somehow made its way far inland through the maze of channels. The shark had been exhibiting unusual behavior, staying in increasingly shallow water, moving sluggishly, showing signs of distress. One morning, our tracking beacon indicated it had stopped moving entirely. Dr. Voss volunteered to investigate alone, claiming she wanted to collect tissue samples immediately before decomposition set in. Something about her eagerness bothered me, so I decided to follow her at a distance. I took one of the smaller boats and tracked her through the winding channels, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice me. When I found her, the sight made my blood run cold. She was standing waist-deep in the murky water next to the dying shark, her hands placed on its massive head. But she wasn't just examining it. She was doing something to it. Her skin had taken on an almost reptilian appearance, with what looked like scales catching the dappled sunlight filtering through the mangrove canopy. Her eyes had changed too, becoming more elongated, more vertical, with an inner membrane that would occasionally slide across them horizontally. As I watched in horror, the shark's movements became weaker and weaker, while Dr. Voss seemed to grow more vibrant. It was as if she was draining something essential from the dying animal. Not blood or physical tissue, but something more fundamental. Its life force, perhaps, or whatever spark separates the living from the dead. When the shark finally went still, Dr. Voss released it and straightened up. For a moment, her skin seemed to shimmer and shift, and I could swear I saw her true form. Something reptilian and ancient, something that had learned to wear human appearance like a carefully crafted mask. I tried to back away quietly, but my boat bumped against a submerged log. The sound echoed across the water, and Dr. Voss turned toward me with inhuman speed. Even from a distance, I could see her eyes. Completely different now. with vertical pupils and an inner glow that had nothing to do with reflected sunlight. We stared at each other across the water for what felt like an eternity. Then, gradually, her appearance shifted back to human normal. The scales faded, her eyes returned to their usual shape, and her skin lost its otherworldly luminescence. She didn't say anything, just climbed back into her boat and headed back toward the research station. I followed at a safe distance, my mind reeling from what I'd witnessed. That evening, Dr. Voss approached me while I was alone on the dock, reviewing the day's data. She moved with that same unnatural fluidity I'd noticed in the beginning, but now it seemed more pronounced, more obviously non-human. "Dr. Reid," she said, her voice carrying an undertone I'd never heard before, something that made my primitive brain want to run. "I understand you were conducting your own research today." I tried to play innocent. I was following up on the shark tracking data. She held up a hand, cutting me off. "Please don't insult either of our intelligences. You saw what you saw." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "The question now," she continued, "is what you intend to do with that information." "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't even know what I saw." Dr. Voss smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. There was something predatory about it, something that reminded me of the way a crocodile might look at potential prey. "You saw a colleague examining a deceased specimen. Nothing more, nothing less. But I know what Do you?" she interrupted. "Because I should point out that you've been working in very stressful conditions. High heat, humidity, isolation from civilization. These environments can play tricks on the mind, cause hallucinations, make people see things that aren't there." The threat in her words was subtle but unmistakable. I thought about Kevin's warnings, about the strange incidents throughout our time here, about the way she seemed to know things she shouldn't be able to know. "What are you?" I asked quietly. For a moment, her human mask slipped again. Her pupils contracted into vertical slits. And when she spoke, her voice carried a sibilant quality that made my skin crawl. "I'm exactly what your species has always feared lurks in the dark places of the world," she said. "What you mythologize in your stories and legends. We've been here much longer than you have. Dr. Reid, we were here when your ancestors were still learning to make fire. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like lead. Why are you telling me this?" "Because you asked," she said simply, "and because I want you to understand the choice you're facing. You can accept the official explanation, heat exhaustion, hallucinations, the stress of fieldwork, and go back to your normal life. Or you can pursue this further and discover just how fragile the boundary is between your comfortable reality and the larger truth of what shares this world with you." She leaned closer, and I caught a scent that wasn't quite human, something musky and reptilian, like the smell of a snake exhibit at a zoo. "I should mention," she continued, "that my kind has survived for millions of years by being very, very careful about who knows of our existence. We're quite good at preserving our secrets." The threat was clear now. I nodded shakily. "I'm glad we understand each other," Dr. Voss said, her appearance shifting back to human normal. "I trust the remainder of our expedition will proceed without incident." She turned and walked away, leaving me alone on the dock with my racing heart and shattered worldview. The final 4 weeks of the expedition passed in a blur of carefully maintained normalcy. I threw myself into the research, focusing on data collection and analysis, trying to convince myself that what I'd experienced was indeed some kind of stress-induced hallucination. But late at night, when I couldn't sleep in the humid darkness of my quarters, I knew the truth. Dr. Voss continued to appear whenever animals were dying, and she continued to gain energy from these encounters. But now I understood what I was seeing. Not a human researcher with unusual habits, but something ancient and predatory that had learned to move through our world undetected. Kevin never asked me directly about what had happened, but I could see in his eyes that he knew I'd had my own encounter with the truth about Dr. Voss. We never discussed it, but there was an understanding between us. We'd both seen behind the curtain, and we both understood the wisdom of staying silent. When the expedition ended, I returned to my position at the university and tried to resume my normal life. But everything felt different now. I found myself looking at colleagues and wondering if they were truly human. I became obsessed with researching historical accounts of reptilian humanoids, ancient legends of shapeshifters, modern conspiracy theories about lizard people infiltrating human society. Most of it was nonsense, of course, the ravings of paranoid minds and attention-seeking fabricators. But buried within the noise, I found hints of something real. Archaeological evidence of reptilian humanoid figures in ancient art, unexplained gaps in the fossil record, genetic anomalies that mainstream science couldn't adequately explain. I never published any of this research. I never spoke publicly about my experience in the Everglades. I understood the implicit agreement I'd made with Dr. Voss, my silence in exchange for my continued existence. But I've never stopped watching. I pay attention to unexplained deaths in remote research locations. I monitor personnel records for researchers with backgrounds that are just a little too sparse, a little too perfect. I've identified at least 3 other individuals in the scientific community who I suspect might be like Dr. Voss. They're out there, living among us, pursuing their own agendas while wearing human faces. They're in positions of authority and influence, able to direct research and control information, and they're very, very good at maintaining their secrets. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if the truth came out. Would humanity be able to accept that we share our world with something older and more alien than we ever imagined? Or would the revelation destroy our sense of reality, our confidence in our own supremacy as a species? I think about Dr. Voss's words often, about the fragile boundary between our comfortable reality and the larger truth. She was right, of course. Most people aren't equipped to handle the knowledge that we're not alone, that we never were alone, that the apex predators of this world learned long ago to hide in plain sight. But knowledge, once gained, can't be unknown. I carry this burden every day, this awareness of what lurks beneath the surface of our supposedly rational, scientific world. I see patterns that others miss. I recognize signs that others dismiss. And sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing research proposals from remote locations around the world, I see familiar names attached to expedition teams. Different names than Dr. Helena Voss, but the same sparse background information, the same too perfect credentials, the same subtle anomalies that mark them as something other than human. They're still out there, still conducting their own research, still feeding on the life force of dying creatures in the remote places where humans rarely venture, still wearing their masks and playing their roles, secure in the knowledge that even if someone sees through their disguise, the truth is too terrible for most minds to accept. I've thought about writing an anonymous account, publishing it somewhere it might reach people who could investigate further. But then I remember Dr. Voss's words about the fragility of humans, about how easily we can fall apart. I remember the predatory smile and the threat hidden in her reasonable tone. So I remained silent, another keeper of a secret too dangerous to tell. Another human who has glimpsed the larger truth and chosen survival over revelation. Another small piece of evidence that the world is far stranger and more frightening than most people could ever imagine. But I want you to know, if you're reading this, if you're planning your own research expeditions to remote locations, if you're going to work under the supervision of people you've never met in person, pay attention. Watch for the signs I've described. Notice the too perfect skin, the unnatural movements, the presence at moments of death, the impossible knowledge, the feeding. They're out there, wearing our faces, speaking our language, moving through our world with purposes we can't comprehend. They've been here longer than us, and they'll likely be here long after we're gone. The only question is whether we'll continue to coexist in ignorance, or whether someday, someone braver than me will finally shine a light into the dark places where ancient predators still hunt. Until then, I watch and I wait, and I remember the feeling of staring into eyes that were never human, no matter how perfectly they mimicked our own. The mangroves keep their secrets well, but some secrets are too large to stay hidden forever. This story was sent in anonymously, and fictional character names were used to keep the real people anonymous. It's been over 2 decades since this particular incident took place. Is it possible that any of you have heard a similar story like this? We'd love to hear your experience. Stay safe.